The aircraft is an F9F Panther, which was an American Navy jet fighter. The pilot's name is Lieutenant Royce Williams, who was flying as a section leader that day. The war taking place was the Korean War, which was happening in November 1952. The specific location of this air battle was in the skies over North Korea, but critically important, it was just a few miles from the Soviet border near Vladivostok. Now here's where the story becomes absolutely explosive. Williams and his wingman were American pilots representing the United States, but they found themselves fighting against Soviet Union pilots flying MiG-15s as fighters. The Soviet squadron was led by Captain Nikolai Beliakov and had been scrambled from a base near Vladivostok to intercept what they thought were American planes heading towards Soviet territory. The real hook that makes this story so dangerous and dramatic is this fundamental tension. Officially, the United States and Soviet Union were not at war with each other. The Korean War was supposed to be between United Nations forces and North Korean and Chinese forces. The Soviets were supporting North Korea behind the scenes, but both superpowers were desperately trying to avoid direct confrontation because both had nuclear weapons and neither wanted to trigger World War III. So when Williams looked up and saw those red stars on the enemy planes instead of North Korean markings, he realized he wasn't fighting North Korean pilots at all. He was fighting Soviet pilots in a direct confrontation between the two most powerful nuclear nations on Earth. The National Security Agency actually radioed the American fleet telling them not to engage because this could start World War III, but Williams was already in the middle of the fight with bullets flying in every direction. He had no choice but to keep fighting or die, even though every Soviet pilot he shot down risked escalating into global nuclear war. Begin on November 18, 1952, with 4 F9F Panther jets on a strike mission in North Korea flying perilously close to the Soviet border. Lieutenant Royce Williams is flying as section leader when the radio crackles with an urgent warning. 7 bogies are incoming. Enemy aircraft headed straight for the American fleet. The command is absolute and clear. Protect the fleet at all costs. Meanwhile, 83 miles to the north at a Soviet airbase near Vladivostok, Flight Leader Captain Nikolai Beliakov receives his own orders. American planes are heading north towards Soviet territory, and he must turn them back at any cost. The script then establishes the critical context that makes this encounter so dangerous. Captain Beliakov and his men are flying the most feared fighter in Korean skies at that time, the Soviet MiG-15s. This aircraft completely outclasses the American Panthers in air-to-air combat with superior speed, climb rate, and maneuverability at high altitude. The two formations turn toward each other on an intercept course, neither side fully understanding what's about to unfold. As the Americans burst through cloud cover at 12,000 feet, the situation immediately deteriorates. Williams receives devastating news from his flight leader over the radio. Terminal engine trouble forces the flight leader to return to the carrier, and his wingman must escort him back. Williams acknowledges and takes command, but now he and his wingman Dave Rowlands are alone against what they still believe are 7 North Korean jets. The 2 Americans are the only barrier standing between the enemy and the vulnerable American ships below. The script captures the moment when Beliakov orders his formation to split into 2 groups and dive on the enemy. The nimble MiGs roll and plunge downward in a coordinated attack. Williams and Rowlands are at 26,000 feet when they see the MiGs split formation, but then the contrails disappear and the enemy vanishes from sight. Suddenly impacts clatter against Williams's fuselage and tracers zip past his canopy from the right side. The Soviets are already on them. The narrative describes the initial onslaught in visceral detail. Williams and Rowlands break hard into evasive maneuvers, rolling and turning desperately as the first MiG roars past them. A second MiG attacks immediately, and more impacts reverberate through Williams's airframe as the speeding fighter rakes them with cannon fire. Before they can recover, a third MiG pounces on the vulnerable Panthers. The Americans are good at rolling, but they're completely outclassed by the MiGs in every other aspect of air combat. When the fourth MiG comes in hot and opens fire with its 23 and 37mm cannons, Williams and Rowlands are already turning hard to the left as the last attacker flies past. But Williams sees an opportunity in that moment. He slides in behind the departing MiG, pulling it into his gunsight crosshairs, and opens fire. Inside the Soviet fighter, Senior Lieutenant Pokomkin feels the sickening impact of hits as alarms blare throughout his cockpit. He's been hit and his aircraft is damaged. Looking back, he sees smoke pouring from his plane and 2 American fighters on his tail. He has no choice but to dive away and run for safety. The script captures a critical turning point here. Dave Rowlands sees the smoking enemy fighter trying to escape and instinctively dives after it to finish the kill. But this decision leaves Williams completely alone against the remaining MiGs. Williams watches as 3 MiGs pull away to regroup, and as they turn, he notices something that changes everything about this engagement. The wings of these fighters don't carry the blue and red circles with a red star of North Korea. They bear only the bare red star of the Soviet Union. Williams immediately radios to his command and control ship with information that could change the course of history. These MiGs are Soviet fighters, not North Korean. At precisely the same moment, the National Security Agency contacts the American fleet. The American Intelligence Agency has been monitoring Soviet radio transmissions and has identified the aircraft as Soviet. The order that comes through is stark and urgent. Do not engage these fighters. This encounter could start World War III between 2 nuclear superpowers. Williams receives this message, and his response is immediate and defiant. He's already engaged and has no choice but to continue fighting. The script emphasizes the impossible position Williams now finds himself in. He watches as the 3 Soviet MiGs climb almost vertically with an ease his Panther cannot match, then turn and dive back toward him for another attack run. The Soviet jets are faster, and they're already committed to the fight. Despite the catastrophic risk of triggering a wider conflict between nuclear powers, Williams has no option but to meet them head-on or die trying. Inside the lead MiG, Captain Beliakov sees the lone American climbing to meet them. The American is coming up alone to face 3 Soviet fighters, and the MiGs have the advantage of a diving attack. The script describes the head-on pass in dramatic detail. It's a test of nerve and skill as the 3 Soviet planes go roaring past the American, all 4 aircraft firing continuously. Incredibly, despite the storm of cannon fire, no hits are scored on either side in this first exchange. Williams tries to gain more altitude to improve his tactical position, but suddenly, a stream of tracers comes flying in from the opposite direction. The other 3 MiGs have rejoined the fight, which means Williams is now facing 6 enemy fighters simultaneously. He brakes hard, rolling and diving as enemy planes close in from multiple angles. The attacks are relentless and coordinated, with MiGs attacking from different vectors to give Williams no breathing room. The script captures a moment of opportunity when 4 MiGs fly past in formation, and Williams manages to get behind them. Inside one of the Soviet fighters, the pilot feels absolute dread as he looks back and sees the American Panther sitting on his tail in a perfect firing position. His training takes over and he immediately pulls upward toward the sun in a classic defensive maneuver, while the rest of his flight breaks away to the right. Williams follows his target and is instantly blinded by the brilliant sunlight. Unable to take aim effectively, he's forced to abandon the pursuit and turn away from the sun. But the moment Williams turns away from the blinding sun, he's met by 2 MiGs diving straight down toward him. There's no time to dodge or evade. The script emphasizes Williams' tactical decision in this critical moment. Instead of trying to run, which would only present his vulnerable tail to the attackers, Williams turns straight toward them, challenging them to a head-on gun duel. He opens fire as he charges toward them. The lead MiG, piloted by Captain Beliakov himself, decides discretion is the better part of valor and turns away from the head-on pass. But his wingman, Senior Lieutenant Alexander Vandeyev, accepts the challenge with confidence, keying his radio to taunt the American pilot and invite him to dance. The script builds maximum tension in this head-on engagement. Both the MiG and the Panther open fire simultaneously. Tracers pour out of both machines, crossing over each other in the space between the rapidly closing aircraft. Williams watches as enemy shells drop and pass underneath his aircraft. He cannot see it from his perspective, but his own cannon rounds are also falling short of the enemy fighter. But neither pilot releases his trigger as the distance between them shrinks with terrifying speed. Then a 20mm shell from Williams' guns strikes directly into the MiG's cockpit, hitting Vandeyev and killing him instantly. Williams sees the enemy fighter stop firing as it passes inverted underneath him, the dead pilot still strapped inside. As another MiG flashes past, Williams fires on pure combat reflex and instinct, scoring hits and taking out his 3rd Soviet fighter of the engagement. In the lead MiG, Captain Beliakov watches in horror as 2 more of his fighters are shot down, including his own wingman. Filled with rage and the need to avenge his fallen comrades, he turns back toward Williams for another attack. But Williams sees him coming and turns once again to meet the threat head-on. There's only a brief exchange of fire as chunks are blown off Beliakov's MiG from Williams' accurate gunnery. Williams dodges the flying debris as the two planes pass, and looking back, he sees the damaged Soviet fighter diving away and breaking off from the engagement. The script captures Williams's tactical instinct as he turns hard to pursue the damaged enemy, but as he does, disaster strikes. A MiG that he hadn't seen screams in behind him and lands devastating hits on the Panther. Williams has been hit multiple times already during this battle, but this time is different. The way his plane lurches violently and the sound of the impacts tells him immediately that he's in deep trouble. A 37mm round, one of the most powerful cannon shells carried by the MiG, strikes his wing and punches completely through into the engine compartment. The impact destroys his hydraulic systems in an instant. His rudder stops responding, his flaps are gone, and half of his ailerons are inoperative. Williams looks back and sees the attacking MiG staying firmly behind him, continuing to riddle his crippled Panther with cannon fire. He immediately attempts to roll away, but his stomach sinks as the aircraft responds unbearably and terrifyingly slowly. More impacts crack through the fuselage as he desperately wills his aircraft to escape. The Panther wobbles unstably, the lack of a functioning rudder making the aircraft extremely difficult to control. Williams is forced to be extraordinarily careful with every control input or risk losing control of the aircraft entirely and entering an unrecoverable spin. Throughout all of this, the pursuing MiG has no problem following the limping, damaged Panther. The script emphasizes Williams's desperate situation. He still has control of his elevator, which controls the aircraft's pitch, so he does the only thing he possibly can. He pulls up sharply and then pushes down, creating a wave-like porpoising motion to try and gain some distance between himself and his attacker before he can reach the safety of clouds, which are still 10,000 feet below his current altitude. Bullets continue to strike his fuselage with each impact, potentially being the fatal hit. His luck is clearly running out, and he's not going to make it to the clouds before the Soviet pilot finishes him off. Then comes the moment of salvation. Williams hears his wingman's voice over the radio calling out that he's coming in on the left. Dave Rowlands appears seemingly from nowhere and comes soaring in, opening fire on the one remaining Soviet MiG that's been pursuing Williams. The Soviet pilot is forced to break off his attack to defend against this new threat. Inside the protective cover of the clouds, Williams pulls up and levels off at just 400 feet above the churning ocean surface. He has just survived a brutal 6 versus 1 dogfight that lasted over half an hour at full throttle, but now he faces an entirely new challenge. The script transitions to the emergency landing sequence, building tension around an entirely different kind of danger. Williams tries to assess his wounded machine, and the situation is grim. His flight controls don't respond properly, and he discovers that he cannot slow below 170 knots without the plane becoming completely uncontrollable. This is an incredibly high speed for a carrier landing, far beyond normal parameters. He looks down at the churning, freezing ocean and knows that ejecting is not a viable option. He would survive perhaps 20 minutes in that cold water at most, not enough time for a helicopter to reach him and effect a rescue. His only chance of survival is to somehow land this crippled aircraft on the carrier deck. Williams radios to the carrier that he's coming in for a landing with severely compromised maneuverability and a minimum controllable speed of 170 knots. On the USS Oriskany, the commanding officer, Captain Courtney Shands, immediately orders his crew to prepare for a crash landing. 170 knots is dangerously fast, but fortunately, nature provides some assistance. A full storm is raging with powerful winds, and with the ship steaming directly into the wind at maximum speed, they can reduce Williams's relative closing speed somewhat. The script captures Williams's perspective as he approaches the carrier. Everything he does with the aircraft feels imprecise and floaty as he teeters constantly on the edge of losing control completely. He spots the aircraft carrier and lowers his landing gear, but the added drag immediately affects the Panther's already compromised aerodynamics, and he starts veering off the proper approach course. Williams wrestles desperately with the controls, but struggles to bring the aircraft back into proper alignment with the carrier deck. He realizes with sinking dread that he's going to miss the landing area entirely. Captain Shands watches through his binoculars as Williams's approach deteriorates. The aircraft is badly misaligned and not getting back onto the correct flight path. Shands knows with absolute certainty that Williams will not survive attempting to go around for another pass. He needs to land immediately, right now, and if the pilot cannot align his aircraft with the carrier, then the carrier itself must align with the aircraft. Shands gives the order to turn the ship and begins calling out heading corrections as the massive aircraft carrier starts swinging its bow to match Williams's approach angle. The script builds maximum tension in these final moments. Williams keeps his eyes locked on the carrier as his barely controllable Panther barrels toward the flight deck. The aircraft is still crooked and not properly aligned, but time has completely run out. Williams is forced to commit to his final approach while his runway continues turning beneath him. 500 yards out, 250 yards, 100 yards, 50 yards. This is the moment of truth. Williams slams his F9F Panther down onto the deck at 200 miles per hour. Miraculously, incredibly, the third arresting cable catches his tailhook and he's violently lurched forward as the wounded aircraft is brought to an abrupt stop. He has done it. He has survived. The script reveals the full extent of the damage as maintenance crews swarm the aircraft. After half an hour of continuous combat against 7 enemy fighters, Williams's F9F Panther has suffered 263 holes across its fuselage and such extensive wing damage that it's genuinely miraculous the wing remained attached to the aircraft at all. The narrative then shifts to describe what happened immediately after this incredible feat of survival and combat skill. The cover-up begins almost instantly. In a massive coordinated effort to prevent this incident from igniting a catastrophic conflict between two nuclear superpowers, both governments move quickly to bury the truth. They exchange harsh diplomatic notes through back channels, but the incident is deliberately not made public by either side. All records connected to the engagement are immediately classified at the highest levels of secrecy. Gun camera footage is carefully edited to remove all Soviet markings and insignia from the enemy aircraft. Any reference in official transcripts and mission reports that mention Soviet fighters are systematically changed to simply read enemy aircraft. Williams is awarded the Silver Star for his actions, which is a significant military decoration, but he's also sworn to absolute secrecy about what actually happened. He continues his distinguished military service and eventually retires in 1980, never telling a single person the true story of what occurred that day. This silence continues for 50 long years until the classified documents about the engagement are finally declassified and released to the public. When the full story finally becomes public knowledge and reaches Russia, the Russian government concedes that 3 Soviet aircraft were lost in the engagement, though their official account claims the Soviet pilots were ambushed by the Americans rather than being the aggressors. The script notes that in 2022, a full 70 years after the battle, the United States government finally upgrades Williams' Silver Star to the Navy Cross, which is the nation's second highest military decoration. The document mentions that in 2026 there is news that Williams may receive the Medal of Honor, which would be the ultimate recognition of his extraordinary actions. So when Williams looked up and saw those red stars on the enemy planes instead of North Korean markings, he realized he wasn't fighting North Korean pilots at all. He was fighting Soviet pilots in a direct confrontation between the 2 most powerful nuclear nations on Earth. The National Security Agency actually radioed the American fleet telling them not to engage because this could start World War III, but Williams was already in the middle of the fight with bullets flying in every direction. He had no choice but to keep fighting or die, even though every Soviet pilot he shot down risked escalating into global nuclear war. Williams managed to land his catastrophically damaged aircraft on the carrier USS Oriskany in conditions that should have been impossible. His Panther had 263 bullet holes riddled across its fuselage and such severe wing damage that it's remarkable the wing didn't simply break off during flight. He brought the plane down at 170 knots, which is about 200 miles per hour, an incredibly dangerous speed for a carrier landing. The carrier's captain, Courtney Shands, actually turned the entire aircraft carrier to align with Williams' crooked approach path because the damaged plane couldn't maneuver properly to line up with the deck. Williams slammed down and miraculously caught the 3rd arresting cable, bringing his wounded aircraft to a stop. But then something happened that, in many radioed the American fleet, telling them not to engage because this could start World War III, but Williams was already in the middle of the fight with bullets flying in every direction. He had no choice but to keep fighting or die, even though every Soviet pilot he shot down risked escalating into global nuclear war.